Welcome back to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Thanks for tuning in. Sorry for the audio technical difficulties once again. We'll have to get on that, folks. So let's get into our space weather update here, and we'll check out space weather stats here at the spaceweather.com, which is where we usually pull our numbers in the first place. So starting this off a little bit differently. Our solar wind speeds, though, are coming in at 459.8 kilometers per second with a density of 6.8. And you guys can see we have two sunspots right now. And I'll go ahead and zoom in on this and move out of the way there. Sorry about that. Shameless plugs. All right, so AR 2812 and AR 2811. There are two sunspot groupings with a total sunspot number of only 26. So, again, some minor sunspots. Still 32 days in 2021 without sunspots. There we go. Let's do that. As you can see where we are after a very deep minimum here. Our TCI coming in at 6.42, and that's up a little bit from the last report we did, was at 6.34. Cosmic radiation was 8.3 on our last broadcast. Tonight we are reporting at an 8.7%. That's an increase of 0.4%. That's the 48. So they've stopped doing the 7-day change. They've changed it to 48 hours, which makes a little more sense. And take a look at our KP indices right now, sitting at a 3. And our 24-hour max is at a 4. And we are looking at this coronal hole that is predicted to be here sometime around the 27th and 28th. I still put up an advisory for the 26th and 27th. We'll see. The last one did show up a little bit early as well, so we will keep our eyes on that. Let's go to the grandsolarminimum.com to our space weather section. And you just click on the X there, get rid of the ad. Yeah, I get ads too, folks. How about that? All right, so we'll take a look at some more space weather stats here. And we get the white screen of death. All right, good stuff. I want to show you guys this awesome, gorgeous photo before we move along. Look at this. Now, this is the Iceland volcano that has erupted. The most beautiful thing I think I've ever seen, folks, right here. Lava flows, the orange glow from the lava, the beautiful aurora from the solar wind, obviously, and then to top it all off, the event that's taking place before our eyes is incredible. The last time this volcano erupted was over 640 years ago. Or longer, or was it more than 681 years? I'm sorry, 681 years ago. It's incredible, during the Wolf minimum. So I'm sure we saw skies like this, excuse me, during the Wolf minimum as well, when this thing erupted the last time. So what a time to be alive. What a time to have the technology to document this and to be able to share this and have it for the books, the history books. And just, again, breathtaking photo here. Amazing. This is on spaceweather.com. All credits go to that website. Christopher Matthews is the photographer on this. Just absolutely gorgeous, guys. All right, let's see if there it is. Space weather is finally up for us here at the grandsolarminimum.com. See a little bit of crackling going on there. A major B flare, almost a minor C flare. Nothing crazy, though. Again, even a C flare is minor. In the last 24 hours, we did hit a KP of 5, which gave us that G1 geomagnetic storm. And we did have a slight watch for that as well. And once again, we hit that storm levels, and this is the third geomagnetic storm in the past 8 days, I believe, 8 to 10 days. As we have been hovering around the 4 KP indice, we are finally starting to settle down just a tad. But this next one that we're going to be looking at here somewhere on the 26th, 27th of March should bring KP indices back up again to the 5, possibly 6 range. And the reason for that, well, it's going to be this coronal hole right here that is now Earth-facing and turning away. Not one, but two. I mean, if you look at it, by the time the solar wind from the leading coronal hole gets to us, we will see wind from the second coronal hole starting to leave our star. And then there's a third one behind it that could hit the far southern part of our magnetic field. So we're going to be kind of on the lookout here. We've had a little bit of CME action. Now we're seeing some solar winds, some minor G1 storms, and thankfully these are all minor. But this is also another indication that we are revving up in solar cycle 25. So, with that being said, what do we have in store coming up in the near future? Another sunspot region that just formed on the northeastern limb, just crossing that area. And what does that mean? Well, that means that this sunspot will soon be Earth-facing. But after that, are we finally going to have a spotless day? I don't know. I'd say there's a very slim chance. It seems like we're always seeing something develop within 48 hours, even if it looks bleak. Something minor has developed in the northern part of our star here in the last 7 to 10 days quite frequently. And again, solar cycle 25 should be beginning to start seeing an uptick in activity, but it's a slow uptick. And right now we're seeing several G1 geomagnetic storms, which is a good sign that the sun is waking up a little bit, but still G1, G2, kind of weak. Nothing to write home about. G3, yeah, well, a little bit. And then G4 and higher, well, then those could do some damage as well. So, but right now, the sun is just sputtering out little G1 geomagnetic activity and nothing to write home about at this time. But we are seeing what we're supposed to see right now in this part of the cycle, and that is activity from our star. Question is, how weak and how much slower of a start can solar cycle 25 get off to? And someone asked the other day, well, how fast is the star supposed to, get started when it comes to solar, sunspot activity? And I don't think it's so much that it's the lack of sunspot activity, but just how minor these sunspots have been, and should they even be counted in certain cases. Some of these sunspots are very, very, very small by any standard. And it's just, to me, it's not about, if the star is moving right along as it should, but some of these sunspots, I bet, didn't count in the last grand minimum that we had as well. So just something to think about there. Right now, looks like we might have a possibility for some sunspot activity on the far northeastern limb, and then behind that, nothing. So we could see maybe a couple of blank days. But the formula pattern that we've seen so far since July of 2020 has been active for about 6 weeks, quiet for about 4, active for about 5 to 7 weeks, quiet for about 4 to 6 weeks, active for another 6 weeks, and then quiet for another 4. So we've seen this fluctuation of the cycle almost with a heartbeat, basically. It's pumping up and down right now, and it's weak. But it's trying to rev it up a little bit, and really I just still see it. It's still in first gear. It's not ready to come out of first gear yet. I mean, we are still experiencing solar minimum. When your cosmic radiation rates are at 8.7% in the atmosphere, All right, that's the dosage rate for cosmic radiation. When sunspot numbers for two active regions only equal 26, when solar wind speeds only reach the levels to create minor G1 storms, if that, you are still talking about a low solar output, low solar activity, solar minimum conditions. So we're heading into the spring. Will we see a big ramp up by this summer as far as sunspot activity and geomagnetic activity? Only time will tell. And right now, it's dragging its feet. All right, so before I get into tonight's weather report, and that is important. I know there's a lot going on in the South. I quickly wanted to bring up an article on this website here. I was sent this from a friend who is basically a AGW believer, and that's okay. You got to have friends like that. You know, it's good to have the healthy debate. We tend to share different views on the climate, obviously, but are still friends and still share articles like this with each other. And the article is called "Ancient Greenland Cave Sediments Contain a Climate Change Warning." Now, I went over this article, and basically they are taking sediment samples, just like how we do in the research world of cooling, where we look up the carbon-13 data. That's exactly what they did here. And they discovered that 500,000 years ago, approximately between 540 and 560,000 years ago, we were actually 6.5 degrees warmer in Greenland. Wow. 500,000 years ago. So, a couple things to point out about this article. It's funny. It's kind of funny. Let me read it to you. Because they say something really ridiculous here. Here it is. Basically, they use geologic cave deposits to deduce that the region was at least 6.3 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than it is today. They're talking about Greenland. Okay? There was a funny comment they made about why this was a warning. And they were talking about how that man has supercharged the climate change agenda, or supercharged climate change, basically. Oh yeah, here it is, down at the bottom of this article. Knowing that Greenland was once so much warmer than it was today naturally is worsening, considering how we're supercharging climate change today with carbon dioxide. The ice sheet is now melting 6 times faster than it was in the 1980s. Well, in the 1980s, it was in a colder era. We started coming out of that colder era in the 80s through the early 2010s. Really started coming out of that cold era in the early 90s. So the data that they're showing right now is that, yes, it might be melting 6 times faster, but they're not telling you that we were in the modern maximum until 2014. All right? So modern maximum till 2014, ice does melt at rapid rates during those periods. But besides this fact, the fact that they use the word supercharging climate change, yeah, the only thing supercharged is the atmosphere from all the cosmic radiation that's being inserted into our atmosphere because of a weak magnetic field that's allowing more cosmic radiation, highly charged particles, into our upper atmosphere. That's interacting with particulates already in place in our atmosphere, such as water vapor, creating these freakish rain bombs, cyclonic bombs, the storms that drop 24 millibars in 24 hours, large amounts of snow and rain with these storms. We've seen these over Nebraska, the Plain States. It looks like a Lando cane. These storms are fueled by these highly charged particles. And I've always referred to these highly charged particles in previous broadcasts as, think of it as a highly charged particle as a magnet. And it's a strong, strong, strong magnet. And if it detects any kind of metal whatsoever, it just flocks to it right away. And that's kind of what happens with the water vapor in the atmosphere, with particulates already in the atmosphere that help create raindrops. And then you throw in a highly charged particle. Well, now you're just strengthening. You're giving it steroids, basically. All right? So here we are, another example of AGW trying to hijack a natural part of our history and trying to make it sound like, if it was this warm naturally 500,000 years ago, we're doomed. No. This article is saying, basically, this is not proving their case, but climate change happened naturally 500,000 years ago. The temperature was warmer 500,000 years ago by 6.3 degrees Fahrenheit. Why? I don't know, probably some natural cycle, right? Was it all of that carbon that was being burnt up into the atmosphere from making those Nike shoes 500,000 years ago? Or maybe it was the carbon that was used that was producing, who knows, whatever manufacturing tools people need on an everyday basis, or all the microwaves that were being manufactured that was using carbon emissions, or the vehicles that were spewing off even the trains that were flowing 500,000 years ago that was spewing off all the carbon from the coal it was burning on those 500,000-year-old trains. People, get real. I sent the reply, because his question after sending me this link to this article was, I wonder where Greenland was located latitudinally. I'm like, oh boy, here we go. I don't believe there was any kind of crustacean movement for Greenland to have that kind of climate. We know, and we've seen these sudden stratospheric warming events. We've seen the warming in the Arctic before. We've seen it before. And it's interesting that they pulled this data from 500,000 years ago in Greenland with the temperatures warmer. I'd like to do a little more research from this paper and dig and see where the data was for other parts of the world 500,000 years ago. Maybe somewhere in Alaska, maybe somewhere in Russia, maybe somewhere in Canada somewhere, possibly anywhere in the northeast of the United States, parts of Europe. Find out different areas to pull sediments from. And 500,000 years ago, see where that put us. Was it warmer? Was it colder? Because look, when it's warm up in the north, all right, and we know this because we saw 2 of these this year. When you have warmer temperatures in the Arctic, what usually happens? That's right. The colder air gets pushed down into further mid-latitudes like it did this year in Texas, where you guys saw 8 days without power and icicles forming on your ceiling fan because your pipes burst. And the water was running down and froze in your living room because there's no heat in Texas. And some folks can say, well, they just didn't insulate that good. No, they insulate just fine. They have air conditioners. They don't want the cold to leave their house. So I'm sure the insulation is probably pretty solid just for that fact alone. So the cold stays in the house, right? So again, another example of these people over there in the AGW crowd don't know what they're talking about. And instead of wildly accusing that man is supercharging climate change, look at the science. It's telling you. The only thing it's warning you in this article is that it's natural. That we were warmer back then, 6.3 degrees. And right now we have scientists trying to tell us that we're in a climate crisis. But yet back in history, 500,000 years ago, without any trains or industries rolling around or man-made emissions at all, let's just pretend for a minute man-made emissions do cause climate change. What changed the climate 500,000 years ago? Probably about a Milankovitch cycle 5 times ago. Probably a solar minimum or a grand solar minimum triggered a bunch of volcanic, warming would be lack of volcanoes. But my point is that it warmed at a higher levels 500,000 by 6.3 degrees. It's warmer 500,000 years ago. And we're calling this a climate emergency. And honestly, folks, that 1.5, 2.0 above baseline, I don't buy that. I go to UAH, and I think they're the most fair and balanced as far as all the satellite data they put out. They're always in the middle. Starman David Birch has showed me temperature graphs of where, UAH comes in at 0.20, one other station comes in at 0.12, another station comes in at 0.01. And UAH kind of like favors that we're taking the high road on this. And we're going with that number. And it's a modest, in my opinion, a modest report. Now, you can sit there and complain about the 0.12 reading being maybe it is the true reading, or maybe the 0.01 is. The fact of the matter is the trend that we're seeing right now is a cooling trend. And that's without implying, remember folks, Green New Deal does not exist yet. So how are policy and lawmakers going to explain the rise in CO2, the continuation rise in CO2, and the temperatures continuing to cool? How are they going to explain that to voters out there who are going to experience higher taxes on every product you buy, every time you drive a car, every time you turn on your TV or turn on a light, or the water for that matter? Everything is going to be taxed way higher. And you're going to be asked to change, not just, mainly just to change your way of life over a falsehood that you are saving the planet from climate change. Now, folks, green technology, the best benefit about green technology is that it produces less pollutants that cause air pollution and water pollution, okay? With that being said, that's not an admission that CO2 is causing climate change. That's an admission of there are emissions that man lets off that does pollute the breathing air, that does pollute the drinking water. We know that. That's a fact. So we're not denying climate change, and we're not denying that man doesn't have an influence on the climate as a whole. But when you talk about atmospheric climate, when you're talking about weather, man's contribution is 0.004%. That's it. You're meaning to tell me that 0.004% drives the climate over the sun? The power of the sun already shows us when the sun goes down at night, the temperature drops anywhere from 10 to 30 degrees, who knows? But it's CO2 that keeps us warm. Well, why doesn't it stay warm at night? Because the sun's gone. Wow. I mean, that's the obvious number one, is that the sun obviously controls the temperature. If it goes down, what happens to the temperature? It's gone. It goes down big time. And I tell you, don't say, well, it comes back up. Well, yeah, but if it didn't, it would just continue to get colder, right? Because without sun, there's no heat, there's no energy, there's no warmth, blah, blah, blah. Right? So without the sun, there is no life at all, period. And that goes with CO2. without CO2, there is no life. If we had CO2 levels at 150 or lower, life wouldn't exist on this planet. Point blank. The more CO2 we have in our atmosphere, the more life thrives. Our crops, everything grows more. Trees, grass, us. CO2 is life. It's not a pollutant. And it's just unfortunate that these websites get away with stating things like we are supercharging the climate change today. How man, knowing that Greenland was once so much warmer than it is today naturally is worrisome, considering how we're supercharging climate change today with carbon dioxide. And then it says, the ice sheet is now melting 6 times faster than it was in the 1980s. Okay, we got a link here? What is this link for? Let's see. Oh, it's from their website. They link their own website that shows what? Melting? Are we going to see any data? I'm following the links here. I want to see the papers that show a graph that shows me how the melt and what years are we talking about. Yeah, they're basing what's going on now compared to a colder part of our history in the climate. Again, they're cherry picking. Comparing 2014's numbers to 1980, I mean, they're comparing 1972 to 2018. Essentially, 2017 is when we started really seeing the minimum having an effect on the atmosphere. We started seeing things going downhill, spiking back up a couple times, but we noticed a downward trend starting in 2017. So how ironic are they comparing the melt at the end of a modern maximum and then comparing it to almost the peak, the heart of a cold period in the 70s. I mean, folks that grew up in the 50s, 60s, and 70s all remember a lot of snow and a lot of cold, hands down. So when you compare 1972, which was probably some pretty strong cold, compared to, and by the way, minimum era also, but you compare 2018's numbers to 1972, you just came out of a modern maximum. In 72, you were in the middle of a cold trend that we saw in the 50s, 60s, and 70s and started to let up in the 80s. And then finally in the 90s, 2000s, and early 2010s, you could say we saw a slight warming trend. Not a lot, a slight warming trend. Yeah, the sun caused that. Why? It was more active. We had a double peak in 2014 during the max. That's usually an indicator of the next grand solar minimum coming up in the cycle ahead. But yet, these websites, like this Gizmodo, whatever, doesn't realize that they're debunking themselves by showing everybody that we were naturally warmer 500,000 years ago, which means if we could do it without man that was not existing, that did not have trains and paper mills and everything that creates emissions 500,000 years ago, but yet we're seeing things happening again that's happened before in real data, empirical data from ice cores that they talk about here in this article, that also show us that we have periods of cooling and periods of warming. We are definitely coming down from that warming period as we head into the next 2 to 3.5 decades. We will see the cooling, especially later this decade. This is only the tip of the iceberg. It just got started. So I know what they're trying to do. They're trying to say, well, if it was 6.3 degrees warmer 500,000 years ago, just think what it's going to be now. He's trying to scare you into thinking that we're going to be at 12 or even possibly 20 degrees higher Fahrenheit. Folks, that's not possible. Where we are right now in this solar cycle, as weak as our magnetic field is, with all the cosmic radiation, with all the auroras out there that we see with the pink ribbons, that's signs of nitrogen. And the CO2, you can make your argument on temperature rise following CO2 rise. Well, answer this. CO2 continued to rise during the months of February, March, April, and May of 2020 amid a global, in most cases, a global shutdown of most factories. We had supply chain issues because of shutdowns, because of the virus. And during those months, when we had lack of emissions, you could see the satellite images of it. The air was cleaner. You could see better through the clouds. I mean, you could tell that man's emissions do affect the breathing air, the air quality itself. All right? But what happened during those months last year is that the temperature started to drop on the UAH and the CO2 continued to rise. They were going in opposite directions. We were experiencing cooling in those 3 months while the CO2 was rising. Just like right now, how CO2 is still high at 417 parts per million, and temperatures right now, we're dropping. We're at only 0.20 above baseline right now. Just back in September, we were in the 0.6 range. So time will tell. And listen, we're only in the very beginning of the grand solar minimum, and we're already seeing very minor cooling at the very beginning. So imagine what it's going to be like as this thing really kicks into gear and we start getting past the 2025s and we really start seeing the frequency and the intensity of what's coming. And I think it's our job here in this channel to get people ready for that. We're already seeing those challenges in bits and pieces here and there across the country, across the globe. But this ain't nothing compared to what's on the way. And it's important that we are aware. All right, let's move to some local weather tonight. Alabama City under curfew after damage from tornado. Pelham, Alabama, Mayor Gary Waters declared a curfew will be in effect after tornado damaged several areas in the city on Thursday, March 25th. The curfew will begin at 10 p.m. The city estimated about 30 to 50 homes and structures have been damaged through the city. Those numbers are preliminary as crews continue to assess the damage. 42 minutes ago, First Lady Jill Biden and Jennifer Gardner postponed Birmingham trip amid severe weather. The death toll increases to at least 5 in Calhoun County. The death toll in Calhoun has increased to 5 after a tornado passed through the area earlier on Thursday, according to WBRC News. SPC issues at least 10 tornado reports within the past 12 hours. As the onslaught of severe weather continues across the southeast, residents from Noxubee County, Mississippi, and Hale to Calhoun counties in Alabama have been left salvaging what could be from storms. Those severe storms that have tornadoes. Multiple fatalities have been reported in Alabama. The scale of property damage ranges from snapped trees and downed power wires. In fact, let's go ahead and bring that one back into the picture here. Here's the tornado reports in the last 12 hours going right across central Alabama. This is the same area that experienced severe weather, tornadic action, except last week's tornadoes did not destroy the buildings that, look at this. Look at that. And judging by the looks of this wood, it's not an old home with these architecture shingles and the peaks on the roof here. From what I'm looking at, this is probably no older than 10, 15 years tops. And this tornado took this out, folks. This is likely an EF3 tornado. This is here in south of Birmingham, Alabama, in the Eagle Point community. Let's take a look at some more pictures. I mean, look at this. Now, what is different about this week's severe weather outbreak in last week's severe weather outbreak, and that is we had the same amount of upper level energy, and that's wind. That was just as strong as last week's outbreak. But what we didn't have working for us in these storms last week was the warmth. Well, that's different now. This moisture is being pulled from the Gulf, mixing that warm, humid air with that upper level energy. Now we are seeing the stronger wind damage, stronger tornado damage. We had hail in Texas the size of baseballs. So there's many roofs destroyed in Texas when this all started up last night. I mean, these pictures are just shocking here, folks. Let me take you back to the live radar right now and just report that all of this moving now to the northeast is going to affect the northeast. And I can tell you right now, it's bringing warmer air with this as well. Line of showers moving through most of central Tennessee into eastern Kentucky, parts of South Carolina, North Carolina, western North Carolina, and Virginia will also have to deal with these. The bulk of Virginia through Pennsylvania into New York and the Northeast. Storms are expected in my part of the woods tomorrow with a temperature of 64. Now today we got to 70 degrees, which was absolutely amazing. I've been waiting for a day where I can get some warmth here. The snow's melted. Let's get outside. We actually moved around a little bit today and did some work outside and got a lot of work done at the house, but it felt nice to be able to open those windows. We got to 70, and this is why. This storm is pulling that warm air into the northeast, keeping things mild. So this is all going to be rain. And remember, we thought GFS was giving us signs that we were going to see heavy snow across the northeast. Well, that's going to stay in Canada. Sorry, folks up in Canada. Thank you for not giving us that snow. But this is just going to be an all-rain thing through Saturday, and then another upper-level low moves through, again, the same parts of the south, but a little bit more north this time. So the focus is going to be on the more northern parts, and then it shifts back to the deep south once again. But this storm looks like it weakens as it goes further east. So really, we got to watch the first couple of days, the Ohio River Valley for flooding, western Tennessee, Louisville, Kentucky, Frankfort, Kentucky, Cincinnati, Ohio, into Columbus, Ohio, also showing chances for heavy rain on Sunday, March 28th. Snow to the north of the border, and it's a good thing. Once again, we were also thinking we could have saw some snow in the northeast, but look at that. On the back end of this, Monday, March 29th, there will be cold enough for some light snowflakes across the northeast, and look out northwest once again. Oregon, Washington, Montana, and Idaho. More snow showers moving in for you and across the northwest mountainous areas. And then another cold front pushes all that nice warm spring. Here we go. Tease and freeze. Warm air again returns to the northeast warmer air, I should say, by April 1st as a cold front comes sweeping across the majority part of the United States. Typical La Nina pattern as well. Bringing colder air again, enough to maybe see some isolated snow showers across the northeast on April 2nd. So what a gorgeous day today and a gorgeous day tomorrow up here in upstate New York. That's all going to change. We're going to see raw March-like weather once again. High pressure seems to just want to hang out here in the northeast. And it makes me wonder, we're showing snow here on April 4th in the north country of New York, Vermont, New Hampshire. And it makes you wonder about, we haven't had anything like Mount Tambora or nothing like that. I'm not implying that we've reached that level. But I wonder where we're going to see cooler summers at this year. And I'm starting to wonder if the Northeast could surprise us this year with some new record low high temperatures for summer. I'm just a little concerned that with all these little teases here that we might not see the kind of weather that most of us long for after having a long cold winter and the majority of the snow that we got this year. Wow. I mean, this is only my fourth winter up here, so I guess folks who live up here are used to this and probably laughing at me. But when you're from Southwest Ohio you don't see winters like what we saw. The snow we got this winter up here would probably take almost a decade for Southwest Ohio to accumulate, if that. Moving on through April, more snow across the Northeast. It stays cold enough, folks. Man, overnight snow still. There's still snow in the forecast. Cold temperatures across April 7th. I hope this is just some kind of crazy GFS glitch, folks, because the cold air is staying in place in a very bizarre shape here. So it makes me wonder, and let's go ahead and because I didn't check this yet, and I probably should have. Let's go ahead and check out what Greenland's doing. And there's high pressure in Greenland. Up here, folks. I don't know if you can see my arrow or not. Nope, you can't. They used to have a pointer on here, and my arrow is broken. Boy, this is just working out. So if folks know where Greenland is, okay, I'll zoom in on it. How about that? I'll just zoom in on it. I'll show you the high pressure that's kind of just hanging out. Look, here it is, high pressure right here. When you have high pressure in Greenland like this, it's known as a Greenland block. And normally, when you have a block situation in Greenland like this, you get these abnormal cold front. I mean, look at this. This is a long-lasting Greenland block. Thank God that this is happening in April and not in, say, February. So where you see the H on the center of your screen at the top, right below the 500 millibar, where it says 500 millibar, there's Greenland. That high pressure, folks, is the culprit on why we're seeing this bizarre cold front, basically. Let's check out and see what it does to the temperatures. It may not be that bad. It may just be like 30s and 40s, but still, again, very bizarre. Greenland block starts to really take effect right around here. Okay, we get the ridge and frizz. Here's another tease and freeze right here on March 31st, right before April 1st. And here's your April Fool's joke. You wake up in the Northeast, and it's freezing again. 40s across the South overnight. Look at that. Daytime highs in central New York, 29 degrees on April 2nd. So if you live in the Northeast, you're below freezing on April 2nd. Overnight temperatures a little bit colder. A little bit more spring-like coming back on April 3rd. Across the Central Plain states into the Ohio Valley. But again, 43 degrees for a daytime high in upstate New York. Yeah, it's kind of disappointing for April 5th. And then here we get another tease and freeze. Yep. More cold temperatures entering April 6th. It's trying to warm up across the south end of the Northeast. So really, the lows are just the freezing part overnight, and we're going to see temperatures in the upper 30s and low 40s. Here we see in 51 on April 10th, but seeing that high pressure dip, you can see it clearly right here. All right. That tells me that there is something going on when you have a weird formation of the cold front like that. Actually, that's almost like a perfect V. But you notice in the lines in the isobars when you're looking, so it switches from this to basically one of these. And normally when you see a jet stream change like that, you got something going on. And here we do have the high pressure blocking going on. So let's take a look at polar vortex air. Is there anything to be worried about? No. Polar vortex is nice and tight up in the Arctic right now. And I'm going backwards. So if you're thinking, wow, that looks great, that is going backwards. Let's start from Sunday, because we start to see colder air trying to make its way down in the lower 48 by late March. Is it anything to worry? Wow, that's pretty impressive for, most of the Arctic, but it doesn't quite reach that extreme in the lower 48. But you are seeing this stuff, this Arctic colder air it's spilling basically only in the northeast part of the United States, maybe some Great Lakes. There is plenty of cold bottled up in Greenland, though. This last image is telling me that things are trying to shut down, and maybe by the second week or third week of April, maybe the second week, hopefully, which would be somewhere around April 13th and beyond, maybe by mid-April, we could start seeing more spring-like temperatures across the Northeast. But an interesting pattern so far. Winter is not trying to let go yet. It's going to be cold. It's going to be raw. It's going to be rainy. And, that's not all that untypical. But at the same time, I know a lot of folks are ready to get over winter. I know I'm one of those people out there for sure. All right, let's take a quick look into the chat and say hello to everybody out there. I appreciate your support. Logan out, good to see you out there, sir. And then we have Thor, good to see you, my friend. He's from the Northeast, so he's probably not happy to hear that we're going to stay a little chillier for a little while longer. Edward, always a pleasure to have you in our chat as well. Wendy, good to see you as well. Knife Collector earlier, Matthew McDonald, and a hello, Fish and Magician, my neighbor about 5-10 minutes away from me. He is also in the upstate New York area. Jerome in the Rochester, New York area. Good to see you out here, my friend. And, of course, Matthew Bros, our farmer friend from Nebraska. So, again, guys, we appreciate all the support. I saw we had a $5 super chat here. Looks like by Lead by Example. Thank you very much. We really appreciate that, guys. That helps keeps our channel going and continue to improve in the technology. Obviously, we're having some audio issues here lately. We will get that software updated or something, get new software or something. But we got to get that stuff fixed. But donations like that helps us reinvest into the channel as we want to make this broadcast as smooth as possible. We want it to be as impactful as possible. And if there's a lot of hiccups, sometimes that can be hard to watch. So, again, we appreciate the patience. We appreciate the support. If you guys like what you see on this channel, check us out on Patreon as well. Become a member for $1 or just join up here on the YouTube side. I think the lowest entry level is like $1.99. So if anything, it's just a $2 tip a month saying, hey, we appreciate you guys. Keep up the good work or yada, yada, yada. That good stuff. All right, guys, that's going to do it for me tonight. Appreciate everyone tuning in to this late edition of the Grand Solar Minimum News Update. We had a late day today, but I still thought there were some important things to talk about and just wanted to give a quick report. So until next time, folks, be safe out there, and we will talk soon.
Do you like this show? Give us a thumbs up. Want to support us more? Share to your favorite social media platform. Buy a t-shirt or become a Patreon. All links are in the description below.